Hello everyone, Michael Brady here from Brady Musical Instruments. I've got a very exciting new Ocarina batch unveiling for this video for the month of February this year. So without further ado, I'd like to give a first look and listen to the official batch number 2 of Brady Musical Instruments high-end wooden inline ocarinas. So over the course of this video, I'm going to be diving into the physical characteristics of the ocarina, some of the background behind the ocarina development, as well as some of the nuances in playing with these ocarinas. Especially with this batch, there are some interesting differences compared with the prior batch, as well as giving a close-up overview of each of the ocarinas, as well as a sound sample of each, and then finally, to close out the video, a playing video of a full song on one of these ocarinas. So diving right in, like the first set, and like all of my inline ocarinas, these are an extended range 11-hole ocarina. So that means they have a total chromatic range of about 19 notes. As you can see, there is a sub-hole for dropping down a semitone below the fundamental, and a split hole for getting the first accidental more easily. Then we also have the thumb holes in the back and the kind of a little bit modified teardrop shaped voicing that I've come to really like for the inline design. So the serial number for these ocarinas are number 10 here, 11, and 12. So this is another set of 3. All 3 of these actually are available for sale. So these ocarinas are made from 3 woods. You've got a really beautiful jatoba for the back, or Brazilian cherry. You have bloodwood for the top, and then the kind of standard aromatic cedar mouthpiece that I use for all my ocarinas. So one of the differences with these this batch is this is a new size. So the prior batch that I released was an A4 size, so that's the smallest size ocarina I'm going to make for the inlines, just because of the complexity and the dynamics of voicing them how I want for an extended range. So this is actually my new G4 size model. Now, one thing about this particular batch is these ocarinas are not actually tuned to G4. These are all tuned to G sharp 4. These are what I would consider part of my Gen 1 ocarinas, so they're a little bit kind of older or earlier ocarinas that I've been working on for release. So during the course of making these ocarinas, I kind of reworked them several times, redid the mouthpiece, redid the voicing on the top, redid the entire top piece to get the response that I really liked. I wasn't happy with the first couple of goes, and I really dialed it in on this particular batch. And I found at the end of it that for the G4 tuning, the breath curve was just too low for what I wanted for my ocarinas. So I pushed it up a little bit higher, and I retuned the ocarina to a G sharp 4, and I feel that that really improved the ocarina. It made it a much better playing, much more balanced, stronger toned ocarina. So I actually have here one of the A4s from the first batch. So if you've seen my first unveiling video, you have recognized this one. This is the maple, bubinga, and aromatic cedar ocarina. So kind of a side-by-side comparison. The G4, G sharp 4 size is a little bit bigger. I'd say maybe about a half an inch to an inch bigger in terms of size or length. It's a little bit wider, about a half inch wider. Same exact depth. All these ocarinas are 1.5 inches deep total. So a little bit larger. It's a little bit more comfortable if you have a little bit larger hands like mine. The finger spread is just a little bit more, but the finger hole sizes you can actually see are pretty similar, just a little bit different for tuning purposes. So another kind of change or update from this batch prior to the other batch is the finish. So the inside of these ocarinas are all still brush coated with a number of layers of shellac. The mouthpiece is still French polished, so you get a nice, beautiful French polished mouthpiece that's completely food safe. Gives it a nice sheen and feel. And then for the body, I actually opted to use the same penetrating oil hardening varnish that I use for my shun. So this actually is a much harder finish than the shellac. It's more durable. And the thing that I really love about this finish is that it penetrates into the wood much more than the shellac, and it really brings out the richness in the colors. So it gives it a really hard, nice protective coating on the outside, which really enhances the beauty of the wood. This allows me to do this type of finish on the body while still keeping a fully food safe finish for the mouthpiece, so there's no issues with that in terms of the finish compatibility. And so that's one major update for this particular ocarina, and chances are I'm going to be doing that moving forward for the rest of the ocarinas. It also makes it a lot easier for me to, if I ever have to retouch an ocarina, for example, one of my own or for someone else, it makes it much easier to kind of do a split type coating, so I can either retouch the mouthpiece with the French polishing. It's much faster and easier to do on the small mouthpiece. I can also do the hand applied varnish on the body as needed, which is very easy to fix up and maintain over time. So another major, a big difference between these two batches, besides the key and the finish, is the type of ocarina that it is in terms of voicing. Now, over the course of voicing ocarinas and doing this dozens and dozens of times now, I've found different ways of how the voicing can affect the timbre and the richness of the ocarina. So for the G4, G sharp 4, and probably for larger sizes, I've worked on kind of 3 different styles of voicing. So for ocarinas, typically you'd expect a kind of really pure, kind of open tone for the ocarinas. That's what I would call kind of the low texture voicing. So very clean, very pure, kind of open type tone. By changing the parameters of the windway dimensions and the alignment with the blowing edge and some of the other features, I can add a lot more texture to the tone. So if you're familiar, if you've heard with ocarina crafting, one thing that can affect this is the sound hole shape. So typically it's thought or known that kind of square rectangular sound holes add an extra bit of richness and texture to the tone. It's not really for everyone. It's not better or worse, it's just different. And most inline ocarinas actually have a square type hole. And in general, the inline type profile really lends itself a little bit more texture in general than kind of the transverse. However, even with a more pure type sounding teardrop voicing, you can still get a lot of richness and texture depending on the windway and the alignment. So in addition to kind of the low texture ocarina that I've worked on, there's a medium texture ocarina, which again, changing up the alignments and some of the parameters of the windway, I can add a little bit more texture to the tone, a little bit more overtones to that. And then there's what I would call a high texture ocarina. So these ocarinas have a lot of overtones, a lot of richness to the timbre and tone of the ocarina. And for this particular batch, I would classify these ocarinas as high texture ocarinas. So one of the key features of that is that as the texture increases for the ocarinas that I make, the back pressure increases as well. So a low texture ocarina, for example, which would have a more open breath, it would be a lower back pressure ocarina, while these ones in particular, very high texture ocarinas, have a much higher breath, a back pressure to it. And that's going to change some of the dynamics and response of applying them. One is not better than the other. There's just different ocarinas for different examples or for different situations, and I found that I do have some control and leverage of how I can voice these and kind of fine tune it for different cases. And on top of that, by combining the wood with the texture profile, you can really have a lot of dynamics in how these sound. So for example, very hard, dense woods are going to give a really bright, crisp tone. Pairing that with a high texture ocarina is going to really amplify that. Whereas using a softer wood or softer wood combination is going to create kind of a warmer, more mellow, rounded tone. And pairing that with a like low texture ocarina, for example, is going to give it a really warm mellowness to the tone. So for this ocarina, again with the Jatoba and Bloodwood, these are quite hard, quite heavy woods. So this is already a very bright ocarina, and then adding the high texture profile to this enhances that even more. I personally really love the kind of uniqueness and feel of the higher back pressure, high texture ocarina that I've working on. It's not for everyone. Not everyone's going to like it. But if you're looking for something a little bit different with a very crisp, defined profile and a lot of texture and richness to the tone, this might be something to consider. And I would kind of almost describe it in a way that it's almost like a like Baroque recorder type richness, for example. I've taken a lot of inspiration from Baroque recorder manufacturing and some of the processes and looking at that stuff for my ocarinas. And I find that this particular type voicing really captures that a lot better and gives kind of an interesting tone and feel to the ocarina. Now, on the flip side, you don't get everything for free, so there's some pluses and some drawbacks to this. I'd say probably the only real drawback, which is not really that much of a drawback, is for inline ocarinas for an extended range. What I found is that depending on how it's voiced, and especially for higher texture ocarinas, the final two notes, so when you have both thumb holes on the back open, so for the second to last note and then the last note, if you underblow the ocarina, you will get a bit of a squeak. So if you're playing too flat on the last two notes, it will squeak, or if you attack the note too weakly or with too much hesitation, it'll squeak. Again, that's part of the dynamics of the ocarina. I've tried so hard for the longest time to get the richness while eliminating the squeak, and just the physics and dynamics don't work like that. You have to, that's almost inherent to the richness of the tone of the ocarina. So as long as you're playing in tune and you attack those notes with the proper technique and proper breath and everything, there won't be any issues. It's just something to consider. Whereas like a low texture ocarina, you can blow very, very softly from a whisper and raise it without having that squeaking. But in general, something that's a bit odd about inline ocarinas is that they're very prone to that underblowing squeak. So overblowing is not an issue. You can blow hard, you can push these ones actually, and it's not a problem. Whereas transverse ocarinas, talking to a lot of ocarinists, an underblown squeak isn't something that really occurs that much. And I don't know what the physics are between the inline and the transverse, but there's something about the inline that really amplifies that. It is quite an immense challenge to mitigate and keep under control, especially for extended range ocarinas, which getting to the 19-note range for an inline, it's very rare, and there's very few, if almost none out there that pushed that range for the inline profile. So that's something to also consider for these ocarinas. And something also to really help enhance the richness is something that I've gone over for the advanced tone control for the prior A4 model, is to to get the best tone out of these, you do need a little bit of a better technique when you're playing. So I'm not going to go into this fully in this video. I'm going to cover this in another video. But essentially with proper breath control, breath pressure, kind of opening up your embouchure, dropping your jaw a little bit, and keeping your mouth a little bit more open and full while you're breathing into it and playing into the focused breath, you can really kind of get a much clearer, richer tone as opposed to an airy tone when you're playing these. So I would say overall, my high texture models, when I do release them, are going to be a little bit more advanced ocarina than typical. I'd say they're very easy to play. There's nothing hard about playing them, but to really get all the beauty and richness of the tone, you're going to want to play with a little bit better technique or a little bit more refined technique. So I'd say these are a little bit more advanced than you would expect. So it wouldn't be recommended a first ocarina or a beginner's ocarina, but for someone who has the experience with ocarinas that wants to try for new texture or feel for their ocarinas. So with all that, let's actually start diving into each of these individual ocarinas. So this is ocarina number 10. So kind of give a close-up of the look of the ocarina. So you can see there's a beautiful iridescence in the bloodwood of the ocarina for the top. So really nice, rich red color, really shiny gloss finish all over the instrument. Then on the back, you have a really nice Jatoba body. So I would say Jatoba kind of has it's a little bit more open grain. It feels kind of similar to something like mahogany, but it's much harder, much heavier, and much denser. Kind of a nice dark caramel color. And where my prior batch, where I had the dark Bubinga body and the light maple, more vivid contrast. For this one, I kind of wanted a more subtle contrast between the colors. So I opted for kind of the Jatoba, the warm Jatoba and the warm bloodwood mix. And then again, you have the aromatic cedar mouthpiece. That's again for moisture control and preventing clogging. If this were made out of all solid Jatoba and bloodwood, this would probably clog quite rapidly, especially since the high texture ocarinas have a narrower profile inside. The only way you can get these types of ocarinas to work is with a highly absorbent wood like cedar. Otherwise, it's going to clog. So that is really not an issue for these ocarinas. Playing under normal circumstances, I wouldn't go outside in a cold day and play them outside. Not only because it'll probably clog on you, just because that's how the physics works for woodwinds like this, but also you don't want to risk cracking your instrument by playing warm breath in a very cold environment. That just goes for really any fine woodwind in general. So a little bit about kind of background for these ocarinas. The Jatoba that I got was actually left over from a kind of unique shun development that I was working on. I'm still working on that. I haven't completed that one, but I had some leftover wood, and I thought it would kind of pair nicely with the bloodwood. So giving kind of a sound sample again of this one going up and down the scale. You heard this at the beginning of the video, but I'm just going to kind of reiterate playing this going up and down so you can hear the full scale of how it sounds. So again, I personally really love the high texture type profile ocarinas that I'm working on. I am going to offer kind of more low profile or standard ocarinas, as well as kind of a mid-range to kind of give a mix. And for custom orders, I can kind of fine-tune for what people prefer. But I've come to really like the tone of this. It has a very crisp, clear tone at the top end, a lot of richness still at the bottom end. Just to give an example of improper technique, again, if you underblow, if you blow too softly, you might get a sound like this. So you want to make sure that when you breathe on the last two notes, you know what, you attack that with confidence. You play it with a proper breath curve, and play it in tune. And you won't have any issues. So again, that's just kind of a little bit of the cost for having a high texture extended range inline, is just to be mindful to play those last two notes with the proper technique, with a full breath, with the proper attack, and you won't have any issues in that regard. So moving on, we have Ocarina number 11. So this one, the response and everything of this one is very similar to number 10. So again, you have a beautiful Jatoba body, a little bit of iridescence to the wood, nice caramel color. You have, again, the really rich iridescent bloodwood for the top. You have the aromatic cedar mouthpiece, and actually this one has a little bit of curl in it, which is kind of nice. Again, really nice, beautiful, glossy finish. So to give a kind of sound sample of this ocarina. So very similar response to number 10. These ones are matched pretty well. Really nice, crisp, clear upper end, really rich low end. And it's kind of the tone that I'm aiming for to make characteristic of my high texture line of ocarinas. Finally, we have here number 12. Again, in terms of look, really no difference. You have the nice, beautiful Jatoba grain. You have the really beautiful iridescent bloodwood. You have the aromatic cedar mouthpiece. Now this one is a tiny bit different response than the first two. It's not major, it's a bit subtle, but it is still, if you play them, if you have a chance to play all three of them, you'll notice that this one has a little bit difference in terms of tone. So this one, I would say its character on the low end is a little bit more subdued. So it's a little bit less forceful on the low end, a little bit lower breath pressure. However, it has a little bit more texture to it. So even though the response is a little bit more subdued, you get a little bit more richness in the texture, kind of balancing it out. So here's kind of an example of what number 12 sounds like. So really crystal clear, rich tone. Again, a little. The best I can describe it is a little bit more subdued on the bottom end. Not that much. It's not really major, but just a subtle difference. Really crystal clear tone at the top. Nice texture to it. I enjoy all three ocarinas, and kind of being first-gen batches and finally getting the tone I want for the high texture variant that I'm working on for these. It's going to be a little bit sad to let these ones go because I really love the tone of these, but there will be more of these ocarinas to come in the future. So that is kind of a major overview of these ocarinas. So now, again, to put this in a more musical context, I'd like to give a full song demonstration of one of these ocarinas in action. So please enjoy a rendition of the the nostalgic Japanese children's song Akatombo, or Red Dragonfly. So with that, that wraps up this video for this batch revealing, batch number 2, again for ocarinas number 10, 11, and 12, made from Jatoba, Bloodwood, and aromatic cedar. I hope you enjoyed this video and got to see more details of the instruments up close and some sound samples to hear what they sound like. If you like these ocarinas and want to reach out about these or future batches, you can email me directly, my email below. You can also follow along with these developments. Probably the best place to follow along is on the Bready Musical Instruments Instagram, where I post pretty regular updates about new builds in the works. I've got several dozen ocarinas in the works of all different sizes, some really incredible woods that are been coming up, different sound profiles and textures, some more low texture ones, some medium, some high texture ones, various keys. So you'll get to see those as they progress and kind of get hints about what's coming up next. You can also follow along developments on the Bready Musical Instruments Facebook page. I do also post in the Ocarina Network and Global Ocarina Community Facebook pages, as well as the Ocarina Reddit. And I'm pretty active discussing some of these developments in the Global Ocarina Network Discord channel. So feel free to leave a comment or, again, reach out to me directly. Again, there's going to be a lot more ocarinas coming up, some very exciting woods. So with that, thanks again, and I'll see you next time.